Good evening, everyone. I am Diana G. Sanchez from BSED English 3-1, and I am about to discuss the types and classification of play of drama. We have the first type of drama, and it is what we call tragedy. If we say tragedy, this is considered by too many be humanity's highest literary achievement. The tragedy is a type of drama in which the protagonist or hero is brought down by his or her loss. Murders, deaths, insanity, and pain are among the common ideas in tragedies. Main characters usually have weaknesses or defects that causes their downfall. This type of drama aims to create a release of certain emotional audience, to bring out the sensation of pity and fear, so that the moment they leave the theater with an understanding of the ways of goods and men, gods and men. The focus of tragedy is on the protagonists, the people who are engaged with the struggle, but they can overcome by opposing forces. If the audience can see that the character can't avoid what will happen, this feature of tragedy and it is called an inevitability. Like what will happen will happen. Example of tragedy was the um, play written by William Shakespeare, and this is one of the famous. It is Romeo and Juliet. In the end of the story, both of the protagonists are died. And the other example of tragedy is the famous Titanic. And cleansing those results in the emotional release is called catharsis. So the catharsis of every audience is brought about by witnessing some devastating and moving change in the fortunes of the protagonists. The next one is comedy. Comedy is a type of drama that aims to make the audience laugh. Its tone is light and it most likely has a happy ending. The classic conception of comedy came from the ancient Greek theatre, where comedy first emerged as a form of drama. When we hear the word comedy, things, the things, the thing that comes up in our mind will be the word, the word funny. We became happy when we watched this kind of genre of literature, film, and even on the television. So, what is the aim of comedy? One of the aims or purpose of the comedy is to entertain. Comedy should capture the viewer's, even the reader's attention with jokes, outrageous scenarios, even interesting characters, and an engaging plotline. But the only main goal of comedy is to make the audience laugh. And now we will proceed to the types of comedy. So we have the two types of comedy, and we will tackle first the low comedy. So if we say low comedy, can also be found in medieval religious drama. In the words of William Shakespeare, low comedy has origins in the comic improvisations of actors in the ancient Greek and the Roman comedy, dramatic or literary entertainment with no purpose. So low comedy has no purpose except to provoke laughter by boasting drunkenness, scolding, fighting, and often righteous activity. Low comedy focuses on physical antics of the situation, and the characters in the low comedy are usually outlandish, and the play is usually exaggerated in their style and their performance too. And now let's proceed to the another type. We have low comedy first, and now we have the high comedy. High comedy is a more refined and sophisticated form of comedy. In high comedy, the audience needs to pay attention to the dialogue. Since high comedy is relied almost exclusively on witty dialogues, not on physical activity. The difference versus burlesque versus high comedy is how the riddle presented. An example of high comedy would be the Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. And now we have the comedy of manner. So what is the comedy of manner? If we say comedy of manner, it is relies upon high comedy. A playwright requires sophisticated wit and talent to write a comedy of manners. These comedies often use minimal physical activity. Heavy use of witty dialogue was the whole hallmark of comedy of manner. Comedy of manner, it is also called as drawing room comedy. Why? Because the main action of this play takes place in the drawing room of upper class. Comedy of manners was extremely popular during the Restoration period. So if we say Restoration period, roughly lasts from 1660 to 1688. The creator of this genre are Wycherley, Congreve, and Sheridan. The play is still produced today across the country. The wit of comedy of manner is built on clever use of language. The wit of comedy of manner includes fans, paradox, epigrams, and ironies. The dialogue that they use is clever. It is often attacking social standards of this day. And now we will proceed to the classification of comedy. We have the first one, this is the farce. This format is a good mix of both low and high comedy. It is a form of comedy where all logic is suspended and anything bizarre is welcome. It involves insane and unrealistic conditions, action, and audacious situations. The farce came from the Latin word fascia, means to stuff, so farce is a comic technique often present in the other types of play. Farce is the main type of low comedy. It is based on improbable characters and plausible coincidence events. In farce, it is include practical jokes and clowning, a lot of physical indignities like ear pulling, shin kicking, and even pie throwing. Also includes chase scenes. Some of the other actors are hiding doors in the closet behind the bushes. From the other actor on the stage, the cover characters always overhear the on-stage dialogue and may pop out to say something, to talk to each other or make a sight. Their lines are spoken directly with their audience. So one example of farce is Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. Next is satire. Satire is a widely popular format where things and situations are criticized and ridiculed to earn a few laughs. In terms of tone, it is cynical form and draws laughter in the hypocritical actions and mistakes of people, institutions, etc. Satire is like the parody or the burlesque. The satire ridicules human folly, societal point of view, or even individual. Satirist is the person who writes satire. Satire attacks intellectual. In the farce, in satire they attack intellectually. In the farce, they use physical antics such as shin kicking, full earring, etc. While in satire, satires does it by mockery using language. An example of satirist is Ben Jonson and Oscar Wilde. The next one is burlesque. Employs caricaturing of ideas to invoke humor. This means that important ideas are dismissed while unimportant ideas are regarded disproportionately. Farce and burlesque both relies on physical comedy and exaggeration, but they are less coherent to each other, but more exaggerated than farce. This is a mockery of a broad topic like style, societal view, or literary form, and audience need prior knowledge about subject of the play for them to understand the entire humor. For instance, to fully understand the well-known Burlesque Boyfriend in 1954, the audience need to know that the boy meets girl scenario was predominant in the musical theater in 1920. Let's proceed to the other classification of comedy, and we have the parody. Parody, which is a form where imitation is done with a humorous twist. things, individuals, and situations are reenacted with the new age production and unfamiliar effects, which brings fresh comics flavor to all these stories. Parody is a type of mockery of a certain person or work incorporating a caricature. If we say caricature, this is a picture or description or imitation of a person in which certain striking characters are exaggerated in order to create a comic. Parody is like burlesque. It requires prior knowledge of the subject being reticulated. It is less relies on physical comedy. Unlike the burlesque, the fact is unusual to find an interplay that is parody, since the topic of ridicule is so limited. But it is still but is still exists, but there are few examples of it. For example is the Mel Brooks movies Spaceball. It is a parody of a Star Wars. More commonly, parody is incorporated into a specific scene of work. Another is the black comedy. Differs mainly in terms of the subject matter it tackles and discusses. This includes issues of gravity and intense scrutiny like politics, society, religion, etc. etc. This requires an in-depth understanding of prevalent social phenomena and expert control over language. This genre is also called tragic comedy. It is called a dark comedy or gallows humor. It is also taking humanity's worst impulses, and actors also use spite to throw in their co-actors' faces. What is the goal of black comedy? The goal of black comedy is to amuse the audience by presenting something shocking and unexpected. While it is typical use for mere shock value, it can also be used to provoke serious thought and discussion about subjects people may not want to talk about otherwise. To make it more understandable, let me give you an example. For instance, the enterplot of Weekend at Bernie's is about two youngsters trying to make people believe a dead man is still alive. It is a morbid topic, but the film plays it was as wacky. We also have the slapstick. What is slapstick? It is about falls and knockdowns, collisions, and catapults. This form is full of physical activity and is enjoyed by almost all sorts of audience and all ages. Television shows like Mr. Bean are excellent example such a form of comedy. The best character of this time is a Punch from the Punch and Judy Puppet Show. They are known as the best slapstickers. If we say slapstickers, this is when our two actors use a two-piece paddle to an accentuate. If we say accentuate, is it is to make something or noticeable. The impact of the heat when the two paddle hits to each other, it can produce slapping sounds. That is the history where the modern name for the comic came from the audience are threatened to the hilarious actors, performing acrobats and intentionally harming themselves. The physical blows were not damaging. Comedians had an almost magician flair. How do I say so? Because they are always also master the timing and comedic illusion. One of the example of stylistic is the MTV's is the Jackass. In this movie, Jackass performers took low humor and violence to a new level. Now we have a fantasy. Fantasy is a genre of fiction set in fictional universe often without any location, events or people referencing the real world. The roots are in oral tradition which then became literature and drama. It is a course in the land of make-believe that is often inhabited by spirits who have natural power. Gods from other worlds like Greek mythology, fantastical works often has a basis in reality. One of the example is the never-ending story in which the story is picked and beaten by the bullies, but the boy finds his escape in the story that feature him as the hero. Some modern plays are also based on fantasy, such as Peter Pan and Wizard of Oz. One trivia for fantasy: the fantasy contains human characters, animal characters, and especially other characters, including witches and fairy godmothers, and I guess Harry Potter is another example of fantasy. Proceed to the other classification. It is romantic comedy. Romantic comedy is a type of the play that consists of a love affair between the characters, mainly the protagonist. Difficulties that arise due to the affairs, the struggle of the protagonist or other major characters to overcome these difficulties in the ending that is generally happy to everyone. The romantic comedy's features plots focusing on the love affair between the flawless and hero and virtuous heroines. The two characters mentioned are ideally suited to each other, and it is also presented as too good to be true. The romantic comedy love affair has its challenge, but of course it ends as happily ever after. The story romantic comedy that is focusing on love, marriage, and courtship is called a romantic comedy. And one of the best examples of this is a Midsummer Night Dream, written by William Shakespeare, and The Importance of Being Earnest, um, written by Mr. Oscar Wilde. The next one is sentimental comedy. Sentimental comedy is, after all, the degenerate type, and in it, we have tears instead of laughter. The age of Johnson and Goldsmith was also the age of sentimental comedy. People believed that the morals and manners of society should be reformed. Although sentimental comedy is classified as a comedy, sentimental comedy is lack of humors. This sentimental comedy is also marked by an emotional and ideal presentation of materials, and the point of being sagmouths. Sagmouths is excessive sentimentally, especially in music. This type of play, the hero and heroine are virtuous. They seem to be caricatures, and the villain shows no redeeming values. The characters are flat, and the plot contrived with virtue always prevailing. We have the best known writer of sentimental comedy. He was Richard Steele, and his magnum opus about sentimental comedy are The Tender Husband and The Conscious Lovers. Since sentimental comedy is a lack substance, that's why the popularity of sentimental comedies was just short-lived. We have the melodrama. What does melodrama mean? Means melodramas are a type of drama in which the characters are faced with exaggerated conflicts that appeal to the emotions of the audience. Use of stuck characters in implausible plots, some with sentimental comedy. Melodrama is also presented as thrice storyline, where a virtuous maiden is threatened by an evil villain but rescued by the flawless hero. Every act of melodrama concludes with a climax, leaving to the audience hanging one for the resolution that sets spectacular and the staging on for the resolution. These sets were spectacular and the staging of events such as earthquakes and shipwrecks was nearly always present. A melodrama is based on the structure of tragedy. If we say melodrama, it is more focused on the action of the characters rather than on their motivations. It lacks of sense, the inevitability that is so necessary in tragedy. Melodrama presents a clear-cut view of morality, leaving no room to question the motivation of the villainous character, who must be motivated by evil intent, or the virtuous character as in tragedy. But in the end, the good characters always triumph, or a great if we say triumph, it is a great victory or achievement. One example of melodrama is the Marie Martin and the Street of London, but many melodrama's elements are present in modern play of O'Neill and all many popular movies. And lastly, we have the psychological drama. What is psychological drama? Is a sub Psychological drama is a subgenre of the drama and um, psychological novel genres, which focuses upon the emotional, mental, and psychological development of the characters in dramatic work. Psychological science fiction, psychological sci films are dramas or thrillers occurring in a science fiction settings. It is often penetrating and sometimes painful. The playwright battles the complexities of the human psyche and personal relationships. Eugene O'Neill wrote psychological and social drama. He also explores some difficulties of his own early. Um, Tennessee Williams was one of the American great psychological dramatists, with the Glass Menageries, The Rose Tattoo, and many other plays. Williams showed the family and personal struggle in his play, while for Marcia Norman in Night Mother deals with a troubled woman and her relationship with her mother. In Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf of the author Edward Albee, um, explore it explores the human weakness and the torment people create when they are unable to accept weakness around them. And that's all for my report. Thank you for listening.